recognizing that identity is at the core of digital advertising, right? The reason why brands want to use digital channels to reach their audiences is because they can actually reach their audiences. They can measure how well they've reached their audiences. They can control how they reach their audiences, right? Frequency capping, targeting, and attribution are the pillars of digital advertising. That's what makes digital valuable for brands.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Expert Zone podcast. My name is Ahmad Benjeloun, CEO and founder of AdLive. And today we're going to be talking about ad tech and the future of digital identity. My guest is Mathieu Roche, co-founder of ID5, which is an independent universal ID solution for ad tech platforms and premium publishers. Hi, Mathieu, and thanks for being with us.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? How are things?
Yeah, very good, very good. Still in a bit of a transition phase between the old world and the new world, but yeah, doing okay.
Okay. And how did you guys manage that internally in terms of the structure, the teams?
So we're lucky, I guess, to be a small company and to be remote already in a lot of cases. About a third of our staff is remote. So for us, it's been a kind of an easy transition. I think it's actually made communication within the team better because everybody is in the same level, right? There's no like what's happening in the office and what's happening outside of the office. It's kind of everybody is on the same page. So we've had to do things like, make sure everybody was well equipped at home to work, right? So there's been a bit of a transition phase there. We've organized daily team meetings, team Zoom calls, right? So that we could make sure that we shared everything that was happening. So we've had to adjust in terms of our communication patterns. But overall, it's been okay. No one has been sick, which is also important. I mean, maybe one of them has, but I don't know. It was in February. No one was talking about it, but she was quite sick. But yeah, so overall, I think from an organization standpoint, it's been okay. I think the message internally has been it's not just a short-term period. We have to kind of prepare for the long run, because it's unlikely that we'll go back to the office, in the next few weeks. Certainly not. Maybe in the next few months even. So yeah, so it's a long-term thing.
And we'll some see it as an opportunity actually. And in France, in Paris, there survey that more than 70% of people didn't want to return to work, like back to the old normal. And even the prices of real estate in this suburb cities around Paris, like they have just rise because people started to like a more remote.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, the team at ID5 feels the same, right? Where like everybody's, comfortable at home, the setup is fine. They don't feel lonely, which was one of my concerns. Like, are you going to get bored, not seeing anyone all day? But it seems to be going fine. And realistic, like we've just canceled our WeWork office. It's saving several £1,000s a month, which, it's always in those days, right? You got to be cash conscious. So, if you can save some money like that, can take it.
Definitely. And on the business side of things, how have you been seeing that?
So it's a bit of a mixed bag, because obviously our clients are directly impacted by the crisis, by investments. And so, when you're an SSP or when you're a DMP or data provider and you see kind of, spend going down to like almost nothing in some cases, it hurts. And so you're going to look at your cost and you're going to look at services that you've bought recently, and ID5 will be one of them. So we've tried to be kind of close to our client, to be careful of all of those things. We operate on a SaaS business model, right? So we sell licenses to our service. So we're not directly impacted by spend, but our clients are, and so we've been cautious. On the other side, we're probably on one of the most important topic for the industry, which is identity. And I mean, you're going to cut a lot of things, but it's unlikely that you're going to cut the thinking and the R&D effort and the tests around identity, because it's such a big challenge or opportunity in the near future. So I mean, we've still seen like revenue growth, and we've onboarded new clients, and so it's been better, I guess, than most people. But again, trying to be cautious and trying to be aware of our clients' difficulties, and aware of the market situation, I guess.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it, but I think the most important thing here, what I see companies doing, and what we've been doing ourselves, is really to secure cash, because you raised that point, and it's very important. The next 6 months are going to be very, very tough, so you better have cash.
Yeah.
And the second thing, and you mentioned it as well, is really to stay close to clients, because they will remember it, like either the good things or the bad things.
And I mean, you're in the same position as we are, right? You're building long-term relationships with your clients, and so it's like, it's not about like trying to milk everything you can of a short-term deal and then move on to the next thing. It's about building for the long term. And you can't build for the long term with a relationship that isn't based on trust, or that isn't based on like mutual benefits. So it's important to keep that in mind, to have an eye on the short-term cash, and what you can do to make sure you're saving costs. And our travel budget has gone down. That's a good one. So we've saved a lot on travel. We've saved a lot on the lunch, the team lunch at Faux. If the team is listening, they'll remember it. So yeah, it's just being cash conscious, but at the same time being aware that clients are probably even in greater difficulties, all scales relative to scale, right? But like, again, we're not directly impacted by spend, and so that's made us a bit more resilient, I guess, than a lot of companies. So
okay. And did you have like the idea of using this time to build some new feature did you speed up your product roadmap, or
so we've been, I mean, our development effort has been pretty strong. We've actually hired a new developer in June. So we continue to invest. I think it's a long-term effort. We're building the replacement of the cookie, basically, right? So it's not something you can do in a snap, and also it takes time in terms of adoption. And I think where we've had to slow down is mostly in relation to the fact that our clients' resources have been stretched. Right? A lot of clients, a lot of SSPs have focused on features that would improve revenue for publishers in the very short term because of COVID, right? And so things that are kind of longer term efforts, such as identity, might have taken a step back. Some people have furloughed some of their staff, right? So they've had less resources for integration, less resources for partnership discussion. So we've seen the market kind of slow down on integration, and so that's had an impact on our own kind of speed of development, because there's no point kind of building in a vacuum, right? You want to build because you've got people to interact with. So we saw a very, very strong increase in adoption by publishers in Q1, and a quite strong increase in adoption by SSPs as well in like March and beginning of April. And then we felt in May that things were taking longer, and that a lot of resources were not available anymore. I think it's coming back. We've had a couple more SSPs turn us live last week. Our volume on the publisher side, or the number of bid requests that are enriched with the 95 ID, for instance, has grown 40%, I think, June over May. So I think it's kind of accelerating again, but we've definitely felt a slowdown, which has impacted us in terms of our development strategy and our ability to deliver features and services to our clients.
And then you just had a catalyzer a couple of days ago with the Apple conference.
Well, the good thing, the good thing with the walled gardens, with Google, Facebook, Apple, and all those guys, is that they're never short of ideas to screw publishers, right? And so like, you can trust them for that. They'll find ways to turn things around to their advantage, right? And so third-party cookies going away is to their benefit, because guess what? They have huge kind of closed walled gardens where you don't need this. So all of a sudden, money is naturally going to go to them. Removing IDFA is an idea to kind of push more usage of their own attribution API, right? And guess what? They decide who's going to win. Who's going to benefit from this? I mean, there's all of those decisions are always done in the same kind of with the same principles in mind, which is how can we strengthen our control of the marketplace? And so obviously when we are in our position or in your position or in the position of most independent ad tech player, which is how can we provide more capabilities for brands and publishers to interact with each other? Oh, you know, our roadmap, our strategy is laid out for us, right? There's so many things that we can do to help them become more independent from Google and Facebook and Apple, become more kind of autonomous, become more intelligent using better data. You know, that's, I think it's a boon for everyone, you know, outside of the walled gardens to try and define how do we do things better for publishers and brands in the future.
Yeah, for Apple, there was an analyst from JP Morgan who was saying like if by changing the IDFA, what happens is that Apple, if they were to start an ad business, they could make $12 to $15 billion annually from first year, and just by changing that. Do you see that like as something possible in the near future?
Hey, listen, they kind of, you know, they hide behind their pinky finger, as you say in French, right? With the pinky finger being the privacy excuse, right? Everybody knows that privacy is an excuse, right? They're not doing this for privacy. If they were, the decision around the IDFA would have been taken 3 years ago, and it wouldn't have been just a pretend protection like they've announced this week. So this is 100% commercial driven, 100%, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if on the back of, you know, the app world being impacted by the absence of identity, and so the difficulty for app developers to monetize their audiences, the difficulty for brands to reach those audiences in app, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden Apple came in and say, hey, we're launching a privacy compliant ad network in app, and guess what, we control half of the marketplace anyway. So,
and cross device, because now they have all the IoT that is already available, and you know that makes a lot of sense.
You can't, I mean, you know, you can criticize a lot of their decisions, a lot of their, you know, approaches to privacy, a lot of their approaches to you know, content moderating when you talk about Facebook, all those things. You can't criticize their ability to execute, right? Those companies are machines. They are, you know, ruthless at executing, and most of what they do is amazingly well done, right? As a user, an iPhone is a great phone, right? As an ad tech professional, I have a lot of things to say against their approach, but again, yeah, there's a reason why they're the most valuable company in the world. Their execution is perfect, and you have to respect that.
Okay.
Despite everything else that they do badly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I'm an Apple guy, so there's no way. And could you tell us a little bit more about ID5? Maybe present more detail your solution and how it works and how it fits in with the ecosystem.
Sure. So we created a company 3 years ago to recognizing that identity is at the core of digital advertising, right? The reason why brands want to use digital channels to reach their audiences is because they can actually reach their audiences. They can measure how well they've reached their audiences. They can control how they reach their audiences, right? Frequency capping, targeting, and attribution are the pillars of digital advertising. That's what makes digital valuable for brands. And those three applications rely on the ability to identify users, right? If you can't identify, you cannot frequency cap, you cannot target, and you cannot attribute. So identity is really the foundation that makes digital advertising valuable for brands. And that's what's driving revenue and growth for publishers and content providers, right? So it's really a fundamental part of this ecosystem that we call the open internet. And it's a fundamental part of what brand need to use to be able to engage with their customers. But those foundations have been made of sand, right? Because we've used very, very imperfect method to identify users, very limited method. And those foundations are being taken away from us by the actions of the browsers and the operating system manufacturers. So the ambition of ID5 is to redesign those foundations, is to create new foundations that are more independent from the browsers and the operating systems, right? That are built by the community for the community, effectively, and to enable identification of devices and of users at scale without relying on those methods such as third-party cookies or IDFAs. So it's really reinvent user identification in a privacy first and a publisher first mode, because that's what will enable us to be future proof and to be independent of third-party cookies, independent of browsers' decision when it comes to cookies or other kind of storage mechanism. Because we see that they don't do this for us; they do this for themselves. And so, if it doesn't fit their agenda, they're gonna destroy everything. So, the idea is really to build an identification infrastructure that enables publishers and brands to interact with each other and to leverage the knowledge they have and the assets they have and the what they know about customers, what they know about the value of a customer for them, to use this on top of this identity infrastructure that we're building, so that they can make digital advertising valuable.
Okay.
Right. So it's a long way to describe what we're doing, which is basically providing a user ID, a device ID for advertising.
How have you seen the evolution of engagement from publishers, ad techs, and also advertisers over the last 2 years? And when I say over the last 2 years, is starting from the GDPR fad and conversation back then, 2 years ago.
So when we launched the business I had the first discussions about ID5 in spring 2017. And back then it felt a lot like preaching in the desert, because identity wasn't real on the radar. It was very early. Our message was, it's not working super well. We can do better. Like, we should be able to do better. Match rates are a huge issue. Plus, the whole ecosystem that we've built things on isn't really GDPR compliant. So we're going to be in trouble in a year. Very little response, a few early adopters, a few people who kind of got the message early on, but overall a slow start. I think GDPR was the first kicker for us because it forced a lot of people to understand what was happening on their sites and how many cookies were dropped by whom and what they were doing with the data, and how all of that was a massive breach of privacy regulations. So there was a first kind of moment or realization around the fact that we actually have a problem, because what we need to do to deliver targeting and attribution, et cetera, is actually not safe, not privacy compliant. So that kind of elevated the topic of identity to a higher level in terms of like the understanding of the industry. So that was summer 2018. So 1 year after we started, and then and we saw like the initial kind of adoption and growth of adoption of our services and everything, mostly on the sell side, mostly from publishers. And then fast forward to 2019, ITP becoming more stringent, Mozilla removing access to third-party cookies, rumors about the IDFA, rumors about Chrome, again, accelerating the importance of the identity topic in the discussions, and culminating in January of this year with the announcement that Chrome was going to remove or block access to third-party cookies, which was really the global realization moment. I think Europe, because of GDPR, was probably a bit more aware or kind of engaged into the identity topic. I think it really became a US-centric discussion as well. Once that decision from Chrome was made public. So it's been an increasingly critical topic, I think, in industry. An increasingly complicated topic as well, because obviously, as is the case every time there's a buzzword like identity, you have a lot of people who suddenly become specialists, right? And so we've seen I don't know how many kind of identity companies are out there, or how many companies have identity in their baseline or in their pitch, because everybody recognizes now that it's an important topic, and so everybody wants a piece of the action. So which is good because realization is good. We need people to embrace new ways of doing things. We need people to understand that it's important and adopt services, but also it's creating confusion, which isn't helping adoption, because all of a sudden you have like, oh, hold on, like I get 5 phone calls a week about people saying they've got a solution for identity. Let's pause and let's wait and try to understand the marketplace. So pros and cons about this kind of a growing awareness of the challenge. More pros than cons, right? Obviously, because it's important that, and we spend a lot of time educating the market. We spend a lot of time trying to communicate on what the challenges are, what the solutions could be, et cetera, but it's difficult to be visible and to be heard in this space. There's a lot of powerful marketing organizations out there. So yeah, it's overall, I think, the fact that we have that discussion today, the fact that, we've seen a lot of press, a lot of comments, a lot of announcements over the past 6 months is positive, because identity is one of the topics that cannot be solved by one end or one or the other, or by one company or another. It is a collective effort, right? When we talk about infrastructure, it's like we're building the roads, right? And so the roads are useless until you've got cars driving on them, right? Or we're defining a new language, but the language is useless until people use it to communicate with each other. So adoption is really what's going to drive change. No one is going to come up with a solution that says, hey, okay, fine, I've solved identity on my own. You guys just have to sign here and you're good, right? It's going to be a collective adoption effort that will drive change and that will drive us into a post-cookie world. Okay. So overall, it's an important topic to have, as a discussion topic in industry.
What we have seen is that, and until maybe Q2 of 2019, we had maybe 75% plus match rate with the SSPs we were sending requests to. And then starting from S2 last year, it started decreasing. And we didn't realize that immediately, but when we noticed some drop in the revenues, we went back and tried to understand and analyze why the bid rates were decreasing in some specific cases. And the reason for that is because for some publishers, some specific audiences, we were seeing that Mozilla and Safari had, in certain geos, certain audiences, had a higher market share. So we were seeing significant drops in revenues on those market shares. So publishers, we started trying to raise awareness. And then this year, I think because of everything that is happening around Google and also about the IDFA, now we've seen publishers reaching out to us and saying, guys, do you know anything about identity? How do we solve it? Does it impact our revenue? So I think that engagement now is at a decent level. So I think it's, as you said, it's the right time to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think it's you've got some examples, right, that are making things easier to grasp. I think people, like you said, they've compared CPMs, and the fact that you don't have an identifier in Safari and Firefox in like 98% of cases has a massive impact on CPMs, like 3x impact or 4x impact. So it's significant. And the minute you start doing that analysis, it becomes an obvious problem. I think there's other driving factors. The fact that the industry is moving more and more server-side increases the problem, because all of a sudden you have to go through matching. You cannot have access to IDs, on page, and matching doesn't scale. So that's another problem. I think in Europe you've got the consent management platforms and the regulations and the need to kind of get that consent from users, and so to engage into a new discussion. So there are more and more issues, but also more and more opportunities to kind of redefine this process, and it just makes the topic more current, more obvious for organization. It's not just the kind of the programmatic specialist in the corner of in the little corner over there who has to deal with it. It's becoming a board level problem.
Okay. And what are the main challenges you see like in the next coming month?
Wow, where should I start?
Yeah.
I think the main one, if we want to pick one,
Yeah.
is adoption, right? Like I said, it's something that requires a collective migration, right? We're talking about a currency, we're talking about a language, we're talking about a way to interact with each other, and so it's the chicken and egg issue is huge, and you need both sides of the ecosystem, the publishers and the brand, to kind of get together and engage with solutions, engage with tests, encourage their technology providers to test, to do things about what's available. There are solutions available out there, right? ID5 obviously, but you've got others, and they need to scale, and they're not going to scale on their own. They will scale because they will be tested and they will be adopted, and they'll start to drive change. But I mean, we've seen I think earlier this week or last week that the IB Tech Lab was discontinuing Digitrust, right? Digitrust was a great idea, probably too early, but a great idea, but it didn't get adopted, and that's what killed it. It's the lack of adoption. It's not the quality of the idea. I mean, you could say, it was, you could argue like some nuances weren't right and like the setup and all those things, but the real problem was adoption. If we had adopted Digitrust as an industry 6 or 7 years ago, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in today, right? So, and that's a really good example, I think, of the risk of sitting on the sideline and waiting for things to happen. Things are not going to happen by magic. No one is going to come with a magic wand and say, boom, problem solved. People have to lean in. Organizations have to lean in. Buyers, sellers, right? We need this collective undertaking, and so that's the number one. Like, again, there are solutions out there. There are alternatives to third-party cookies. There are ways to identify users better, right? We just need those solutions. They will only be valuable when they are adopted and when they scale. And so we need to get this started. I think we're underway. Several of us are underway. Again, we're seeing growth, we're seeing more adoption, but we need more engagement because the clock is ticking. We have 2 years, right? It's not a long time. We have less than 2 years probably to come up with an answer. So that would be like number one on my list. Then you have some technical challenges. You have some market dynamics. Google pushing the cohorts narrative with their privacy sandbox approach,
Yeah.
which I think is a dangerous narrative because it gives us the illusion that we will have a backup, that we will have a solution, but in reality, it will be a really degraded solution in terms of the capabilities that we will have as an industry to do things intelligently. The logic of privacy sandbox is that the intelligence basically rests with Google. And we're just like, we use whatever they give us in terms of like segmentation, in terms of attribution, which sounds great from Google's standpoint. I don't think it sounds great for everybody else, isn't it? But it's getting a lot of traction because it's Google, obviously. And so, I think it would be a mistake to put all of your eggs into this basket and consider Google is going to solve the problem for us. Um, Obviously, the decision that Apple announced on IDFA is another huge challenge because it's not a full-fledged decision yet. You can see that they're trying to protect their revenue stream or their potential revenue stream with advertising and in-app ecosystem and stuff like that. But it's creating another area of challenge or area of opportunities. It's not just about the third-party cookie anymore. It's also about the in-app world. And then you've got the connected TV world that you know well, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's another ball game in terms of identification capabilities.
Yeah.
So there's no shortage of challenge. I think that in itself might be an issue, right? There's a risk of having too many things to chase at the same time. And for everyone who knows me, they know that I've been very cautious managing expectations with our clients, with our partners, right? Not try to overpromise. On the contrary, under-promise but over-deliver. We had a publisher, a large publisher in the US, turn us off last week, and they were like, "Oh, it's funny. Since we turned you on, we saw a revenue uplift, and you told us that we not to expect anything." that's been our approach, right? Let's try to not over inflate expectations. Let's try to make sure people are conscious of the challenge and go step by step. So I think there's a risk that we stretch ourselves too thin, and lose sight of what's the next step and what's the step after that. But yeah, again, adoption is number one on my list. Convincing people that they need to test, that this is real, right? That this is a real problem and that we have real solutions for that problem, but that they need to be tested, implemented, finalized in some cases, and we need to do this collectively.
Well, if I analyze that from the sell side revenue side, what happened with the GDPR is that there wasn't a real adoption until maybe 1 week before the D-Day, and then you can see that also on Google Trends. It's very funny, and then people start saying, okay, nothing happened. So there was a huge drop in engagement until some big players started saying, okay, we're risking too much because we can risk 4% of our global revenue. So we're not going to be messing around. And when publishers saw a real drop in revenues when they were not implementing consent, they started saying, okay, now consent is important. And I think that what is happening right now, like for the last couple of quarters, is that when match rates or when attribution is not really, it's not done properly, we see this drop in revenue. So it's an easier conversation to have with publishers today when saying, okay, if you manage your ID in a better way, you're going to have some extra revenue. This is important. So I think that's a very good ally for you. And in terms of alternative solutions, what I've seen again with Google, it's a black box. You're totally right. And the second thing, it's the path with least resistance. So same thing happened with EBGA in terms of publishers' revenue management. It's not optimal. Publishers know it, but it's a black box. They know it. But the thing is, it's just they just switch a button and it works.
It's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's there's a hidden costs in easy, right?
Huge.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't realize it now. Sometimes you realize it later or whatever. But there's in the history of ad tech, right? Easy has never been a good idea, right? I remember, I'm going to show my age, but 15 years ago, agencies were all in on SEM, right? And optimizing Google spend and stuff like that because it was an easy way to make money because they would get a cut and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, Google said, okay, no more agency commissions. Hundreds of people lost their job, thousands of people lost their job because, flip a switch. It was easy, but until it wasn't anymore because, Google's narrative changed or their focus changed or whatever. So yeah, and there are examples like that, right? You can talk about, DFP or whatever they call it, ad manager or whatever, right? Cheap, but then all of a sudden you realize that actually for a reason, it's cheap because they make all the money, right? Yeah. And they take and, they've been communicating take rates recently, and you can see that it adds up to more than 50% in reality. Yeah. Once you add everything, right? They communicate 69% here and 70% there, but actually it's additive, right? So in the end, you're really under 50% of money going from the brand to the publisher through the Google stack. Yeah. So, it's easy, definitely easy, but for a reason. They want it to be easy because they want it to. That's where they drive their money. That's where they drive their money.
Great. Well, thanks, Mathieu. Any news that you want to share with our audience? Any next steps for you and ID5?
Still banging the same old drum. We're in it for the long run. This is a structural challenge for the industry. We need to address it together, collectively. Yeah, we're all in.
Okay. Thanks again, Mathieu. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And I'll see you soon, everyone. Bye.
Bye.